did. I don't think I did.
You did?
No.
Yeah, you said it was really?
That doesn't sound familiar to me. No, there's a question of whether Eichmann could be called, whether an appeal could be made to Eichmann. And according to the account that Arendt gives of the person who lacks conscience, and Eichmann is such a person, he cannot be called upon. There's no appeal from the other that could be received. I'm not sure it's conscience that calls.
Okay.
In fact, I'm sure it's not conscience that calls.
So you will see that's how Arendt is different from Heidegger in that sense.
Well, I actually think this is more of a potentially Heideggerian moment than most. When she says there's no person there, or she presumes that there's no receptivity to the call of others, to the perspective of others, to the suffering of others, I actually think that she might well be drawing on a certain idea that to think is to be available to a solicitation from the outside. And the problem with Eichmann is that that he had ceased to be available.
My question is, okay, I'm just gonna, I don't know if I believe this, I'm just putting out.
That's okay.
It seems to me that there is an ongoing genocide going on right now, every day, every minute, and that would be genocide of animals and nature and species are dying off. So my question is, where is the non-human in Arendt's philosophy of plurality?
Yeah, it's not there. That's one of the problems that I raise at the end. I think it's just not there. It's the plurality of human life, and the problem is that life itself, bios, is I think not adequately thought outside of that particular anthropocentrism.
But to be fair, I have been the first philosopher who thought that ecology is a philosophical question, and that was in '64. And before that, nobody would ever even consider it. Okay, Tim?
To follow on, I think actually from what Michael was saying, I guess my question would be, what is your purpose, or what are you working towards by working through Arendt's arguments to this degree of elaboration? It seems that one thing that you kind of laid out at the end was to try to sort of shore up or to extend her thought in order to prevent the precarious nature of life for these populations, for the plurality of humankind. And I think that Mike is kind of pointing to another very interesting extension of this thought, but I was wondering what your intentions or plans are for it, if you have them.
Well, it's difficult because, in fact, I started working on Arendt as part of a book I'm writing on Jewish philosophical approaches to state violence. And one of the things I'm trying to show is that there's a serious tradition of the critique of state violence that has been, to some degree, either misunderstood or effaced over time, and which I think is important at this point to reanimate in order to criticize contemporary state violence and not be accused of anti-Semitism when you do so. And indeed, that particular part of my politics is driving a great deal of my work right now. But I did get, in some ways, sidetracked onto these problems as I am working on this other book, because it seemed to me that on the one hand, it's a very strong argument, the argument from plurality, and I think people have not considered it well enough, and I think her very rigorous critique of sovereignty is also very interesting, especially in these days when so many people are reading Schmidt and apparently engaging with a certain kind of romance of sovereignty. And yet, I also note that she's not able to escape the sovereign presumption, even though she is elaborating this notion of plurality. So it's actually the notion of cohabitation which is normatively important to me, and which I hope to extend. But I would agree with you that cohabitation actually has to overcome its anthropocentrism in order to make good sense.
Thank you so much, and I know we're all fatigued and yet awakened by you to a certain kind of vigilance. I just wanted to add perhaps 2 points to which you don't have to, I mean, you don't have to take this poll at all. But one is my own interest in her shock and locating her wound in what she's witnessing with Eichmann. And one is her shock that he's stupid, that he's not thinking, but his stupidity. And we discussed this in other contexts, in her letter to Jaspers, for example, which she almost promotes beyond the concern of the banality of evil, but what a stupid jerk he is. But what's interesting in listening to this, and then there's so many articulations, including that of Robert Musil, that the Nazis were the most non-thinking. They had no books to back them up. They had no thought behind, and so on. Not even a little red book or brown book.
Yeah.
Nothing, except well, anyway. But nonetheless, listening to you, the fact that that the struggle was around and the wounding was also around the legacy and who could own Kant.
Yeah.
Still way higher than someone like Bush or those other idiots.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, obviously there was a violent distortion of the Kantian text. Nonetheless, they're struggling around that legacy, which is already something, let's say, it seems to me. It's close to nothing, but it's something. But, and the other point concerns the fictional shooting of blanks that she indulges in a way, which is a Kantian act.
Mm-hmm.
But it also rooted, I thought, the gesture and the syntax of her attack back toward Kafka in a certain way, with his ways of wielding the weapon of "I sentence you to death,"
Mm-hmm.
which, as you yourself have remarked, has pushed some of his figures over the edge and over bridges and so on and so forth. But it made me think of his letter to his father as well, where in the end he ventriloquates the judgment of his father and the kind of incorporations and as you say, the splitting and the but what it also suggests, just now I'm fast forwarding that, and I think you said it in certain ways, is that she, addressing Eichmann, has to necessarily become him as well. I don't know if you wanted to.
Well, I think
that.
there are two, if I could start at the end, I think there are two issues. When she says this is how the judges should have, or if they had dared to say what they were doing, this is what they should have said, and then she goes into this direct address. The class where we discussed this actually, suggested that it was a moment of intense identification with the act of sentencing to death and a kind of thrill as well. I sentence you to death by now, by hanging, and so that it's a highly populated. Talk about plurality. It's a highly populated moment, and by addressing him as you, she does bring him at least into her interlocutor